On already. I hadn't even got started up here good. I mean, that's supposed to come a lot later in the sermon than right now. So, it's good to be back here tonight. It's really good to be back here on a Sunday evening. It's been a little while. So, I've missed y'all in the evening time and thankful that we are back here and able to meet again tonight. I want to look tonight about the idea or the differences in being afraid and having a godly fear, of being afraid of life and trembling before God. The understanding that there is a time and a place and there is a difference. We know that we are here today because we believe in the gospel. We believe in the story. We believe in the book. We believe in God's promises that He is a sovereign God, that He is in control, and that He is going to fulfill His promises. We're told in Isaiah chapter 52, verse 7, how lovely on the mountains are the feet of Him who brings good news, who announces peace and brings good news of happiness, who announces salvation. It says to Zion, your God reigns. That is a message that we need to remember today. The understanding that the world needs to hear and we need to know and we have to proclaim that our God reigns. God says that we are a beautiful creation, that our feet are beautiful when we deliver that message to the world. But sometimes we're afraid. Sometimes we fear going out and delivering that message. Sometimes we let, as we talked about a little bit this morning, the idea that politics get in the way. We're scared of losing friends. We're scared of losing family. We're scared of alienating a neighbor. We're scared of the repercussions on social media. We have fear. And fear is a very real emotion. There's no doubt about it. We have all at one point in time experienced it, and we all will again probably. But what we cannot do is live in a fear that prevents our faith. That is something that the world is experiencing right now, and it's not new. We see it in biblical times as well. We understand that, Mark chapter 4, verse 40, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Christ says, look, where's the faith that should get you from this point? Where is the faith that it should keep you from living in fear? If we choose to live in fear daily, fear for our worldly existence, fear for our businesses, fear for our life here on earth, fear of what a neighbor will think, fear of what our families will think, fear of what another denomination will think of us, fear of what our government will say if we keep talking about what we're talking about. If we live in that kind of fear, our faith will not progress. It will be impossible to continue to study, to continue to learn, to continue to teach, to continue to go out and proclaim, like we just looked at, that our God reigns. So we cannot live in that fear that prevents our faith. Christ goes on in Mark chapter 5, verse 36, says, do not fear, only believe. Believe that I am He. Believe that I am the one that is supposed to be here. Believe that I am the one that is prophesied about. Believe that I am the fulfillment of everything. And believe that I am your sovereign God. Christ is giving us a message here. He is giving us the idea and the understanding how to move past this fear that controls and that grips us. That fear that keeps us from doing what we need to do. That fear keeps us from fulfilling our job as Christians as we know it exists. We are all told that we have a job in the kingdom. We're all told that we have a part to play. We're all told that we are to go out and proclaim the gospel. That we are to teach our neighbors. That we are to live as Christ lived. That we are to be a light to the community. That we are to be this light that's set on a hill and is not hidden. That we are not to hide our lampstand. But sometimes we've been guilty of letting fear hide our light. Or hide our light because we're living in fear. Sometimes we're guilty of turning and looking the other way because we don't want to know what will happen if we speak up. Or we do know what will happen if we speak up, and we don't want that. Christ said the answer to that is to believe. Believe that I will fulfill every promise. That no matter what happens on this earth, it'll be worth it in eternity. That no matter how you're ridiculed and how you're persecuted on this earth, it will not cost you your everlasting life. You will gain that reward that we read about in Scriptures here. Christ says, do not fear, only believe. So I want to look tonight at that belief. I want to look tonight at that fear for a little bit. And like I said, I want to look at the difference in fear and in trembling. There is a fear that keeps us from building our faith. There is that fear that keeps us from exercising our faith that we looked at. There is that fear that keeps us from building on our faith and doing more for God and being comfortable where we're at right now. I know my role as it exists today. I'm comfortable in this role as it exists today. So therefore, I will not go forward, God. I'm happy where I'm at. Use me right here. Life's good, God. I'm afraid of what's on the other side. I'm afraid of going through that door. God, I know you said that I need to grow. God, I know you said that I need to move forward. God, I know you said that I can't stand in one place, but I'm comfortable here. Don't ask me to go any further, God. Don't ask me to move on past this point. So that is one side of fear. But there is a fear that actually takes us past that point. That instead of holding us where we're at right now or making us go back, it produces a faith in God. Mark chapter 4, verse 41. And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? We see at times going forward they stumble. We see at times going forward they have difficulty. But what we see right here is an understanding that He is something special. He is what He said He is. He is the one that I see it, the winds, the waves. The creation obeys Him because He is the Creator. We see a faith here. We see an understanding as they get out of the boat that things are going to change going forward. That we are going to be able to ask to do things. That we are going to be able to do things that we didn't know were possible. Mark chapter 5, verse 33. But the woman came in fear and trembling and fell down before Him. Not understanding exactly what's going on, not understanding exactly why things are what they are. We see her fall down at the Master's feet and say, I'm where I need to be. This is it. You are greater than me. I will submit before you. I will bow before you. I have the faith that this is right. How beautiful of a thought is that? To fall down at the Master's feet. And trembling and understanding that you are in the presence of the Creator. That you are where you need to be. It's a beautiful story. Now understand that she had faith to begin with. She knew that if I reach out and if I touch that garment, something can happen. She knew that there was something special about Him. And she would not live in fear of what was going to happen. She was willing to take that step. She was willing to move forward. She was willing to go through that door and say that you may try to keep me away from the Creator, but I will not be kept back. I will touch Him. I will come into His presence. See, fear could have kept her from it. Fear could have kept her away. She could have listened to the others and thought that, okay, well, I don't deserve to be here in His presence. I'm sick. I'm not worthy. If He wanted me healed, He would seek me out. If He wanted me healed, He would come to me. He would stop. He would acknowledge that I'm here. Instead, she said, I am going to chase Him down. I'm going to come into His presence. If I touch even His garments, I will be made well. is what we see in verse 28. She said, I am going to do it. I am going to put myself in a position where I am with the Master. And then when he realized what happened, she knows she's been made whole. She knows things are right. And she falls down at his feet. That's faith. That is a fear that produces faith. Understanding that I am in the presence of something great and I have to be here. This is what's right. That is an absolute beautiful story in my book. I love the fact that it is included. I love the fact that we see that there's this great crowd around him and that she's had this issue in 12 years. 12 years. You see us coming out of last year and people are beaten and they're tattered and they're weary and man, that was a bad year. And man, look at everything that's going on. Look at all the pain. Look at all the heartache. Look at all the struggle. Look at everything that God put me through last year. 12 years this woman had been dealing with this. And she knows that God is the answer. She knows that God has the power. And she puts herself in a position to be made clean. 1 year versus 12 years. There is a fear that produces faith. Isaiah chapter 8 verse 11. And you are not to fear what they fear, to be in dread of it. God says that the same thing the world fears, that's not what you need to fear. The same thing the world dreads, that's not what you need to dread. The same thing the heathens out there, the same things that those who are not my children, that's not what you need to be afraid of. It is the Lord of hosts whom you should regard as holy, and he shall be your fear, and he shall be your dread. Isaiah chapter 8, verse 11. God said the world fears death. The world fears politics. The world fears their neighbor. The world fears all these wars and political infightings and separation from family, separation from friends. God says you fear me and me alone. He said that's the difference in you and the world. That's the difference in the way a Christian reacts and the way the world reacts. That's the difference in the way somebody who has a knowledge of God lives versus somebody who has a knowledge of the world lives. God said, you don't live the same way they do. You don't fear the same things they do. You don't dread the same things you do. You fear separation from me. You dread that time when we're not together. You fear an understanding that obedience to Satan means separation from me. God said those are the things you fear. So that fear drives you to faith. That fear drives you to understanding, how do I stay in this right relationship with God? How do I follow Him? How do I stay close? How do I reach out and touch His garment? How do I put myself in a position where I'm that close to God that I can reach out and touch Him? See, as Christians, we choose to tremble instead of choosing fear. Instead of choosing what the world says, there is inside each and every one of us a choice that is to be made of whether we're going to be afraid or whether we're going to tremble. And I want to look at the difference there. I want to look, because on the surface it doesn't really seem like there is one. But when I'm afraid, when I live in that fear, my problems are too big. They're too much for me to take care of. They're too much for me to handle. They're overwhelming. I don't know how to move forward. I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go. I don't know where to turn. I don't know what the world is going to bring at me. And I'm afraid. But when I tremble, I understand that my God is bigger than these problems. I understand that my God has the answer. I understand that He is the living God, that He is the Creator, and that everything going on in this world today, while I may not understand it, it is playing some part in His plan. And that since I'm here on this day and in this time, going through this experience, I'm playing a part in His plan. God has a job for me and He has a job for you. He put us in 2020 and 2021 for a reason. He has a plan for us. Because He's got a plan for His church. And that is to bring as many to Christ as we can. That is to spend eternity in heaven with Him. That is to be the light that we talked about early on, and the understanding that we will not let anything that is going on in this country and in this world today hide our light. We're not going to live afraid like that. We're going to tremble at the presence of God. We're going to understand that we're in the presence of holiness. We're going to understand that He deserves and He demands and He gets our reverence. But we're not going to be afraid of the world. We're not going to be afraid of Satan, because we know God overcomes Satan. We know the only power Satan has over us is what we give him. And that is just in our obedience to him and disobedience to God. So Satan has no power over us unless we choose to let it happen. God is victorious. See, when I'm afraid of what the world has to offer, when I'm afraid of what's going to come tomorrow, when I'm afraid of what the government's going to do, or when I'm afraid of what whoever's in this political office is going to do, I shrink away from God and I start trying to control things myself. I'm going to hide within myself. I'm going to hide within my house. I'm going to shrink back and I'm going to control all the little things around me and who I let in my bubble and what that means to me and what comes into my mind and what goes out. And we forget that God is in control because we take that control away from Him. God, there's a whole lot of scary stuff going on right now, so I'm just going to go hide in my closet. I'm going to hide in my house. I'm going to hide by myself, and I'm going to live in fear, but at least I'm going to live, God. I'm going to be okay in this little closet, in this little bubble, in this little safe cocoon that I've created. Instead of clinging to Him and saying, God, I'm placing myself at your feet. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to touch the hem of that garment. I am going to tremble at your feet when you see that I am here, because I know the power that you have. I know that you created this world. I know that you created this universe. And I know that you died on the cross for me. God, I tremble in your presence. That is the answer to fear. It's putting ourselves in the presence of God. Putting ourselves in the presence of His holiness. Putting ourselves right there at His feet and saying, God, you are my God. Mark chapter 16, verse 8. And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. See, there are two responses to God. When we realize that God is God, we can have one of two responses. We can either tremble in His presence, or we can shrink away in fear. We can either say, God, this is where I need to be. I understand it. I don't understand everything that's going on, God, but I understand you're in control, and I am placing myself here so that I can learn, so that I can study, so that I can draw closer to you. Or we can run back into the storm and keep our mouths shut. These people understood what had happened. They understood that Christ had risen from the grave. They understood that things changed. But they didn't have the right approach to it. Instead of seeking out the one who had just changed everything, instead of seeking out the one that had just fulfilled prophecy and changed history, they went and hid. I'm not going to let the world know that I saw this. I'm not going to let the world know that I've experienced God. I'm not going to let the world know that God is alive. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Or there's a response that we should have. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. I believe that you are God, but at times I struggle with the understanding that you do control everything. Help my unbelief. Lord, I understand that this is all part of your plan. I understand that we have put ourselves in this position because we turned our back on you, God. Help my unbelief. Help me see our way through this. Help me understand that clinging to you is the answer and not pushing you away. God, I understand that you created this universe. I understand that everything that goes on is by your foreknowledge. God, help my unbelief, because right now I'm struggling. There's a difference in fear and there's a difference in trembling. There's a difference in living in fear and being afraid. There's a difference in placing ourselves at the foot of the Master and saying, God, this is where I belong. I need to be close to you. I need to cling to you. And in trying to shrink away and control everything ourselves. See, for too long, we have, as a country, as a nation, as a church at times, said to God, I'm going to control this myself. God, we got things covered here. We're okay. Everything's coasting along just fine. We'll be all right. And now that times are a little bit rocky, what we find is we're shrinking away. We're hiding in the closet. We're starting to doubt. We're starting to doubt ourselves. We're starting to doubt the Creator. God said, I hadn't changed. God said, I'm still right here. God said, this is a time when you decide, are you going to cling to me or are you going to push me away? You're going to cling to me or are you going to run? Are you going to acknowledge the fact that I am God, or are you going to go, like we see in chapter 16, verse 8 here, Mark, and just keep your mouth shut? My prayer today is, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Help me take this time, this moment, this experience in history, and believe all the more that you are God, that you are in control, and then go out and show the world. This is not a time for Christians to shrink away in fear. This is not a time for us to keep our mouths shut. This is not a time for us to go away and for us to hide. This is a time when we stand up and say that God is God, that He is sovereign, that He is our Lord, that He is our Master, that He is still in control, and that we will still obey Him. So the question is, how do we move forward? What do we do? It's only two options. We either follow God or we shrink away from God. That's it. Those are the two options. God says, I demand your obedience. If you need the prayers of the church today, if you need to put on Christ in baptism, if you need to reach out, if you need to sit down and study, if you need help because you've been living in fear, whatever your needs are, we can sit down and we can address those needs now. But you don't have to do it alone. That's what the body of Christ is all about. If you need the prayers of the church, whatever you need, let's take care of those needs tonight as we stand and sing.